Good day. Welcome to Paul, Proclaim, Analyze, Understand, and Learn. So today we will be talking about first proclaiming the October 27, 2024 Sunday Mass readings. That's from last week. And the readings are from Jeremiah, Psalms, Hebrews, and Mark. And then afterwards we will do a little bit of discussion regarding Israel and Judah. Lament and Pilgrimage Psalm, Jesus as High Priest appointed in the order of Melchizedek, Jericho and Jerusalem, and Jesus' miracles. So again, these are the readings from last Sunday, which we will review. If you want to be notified, again, press the subscribe button. And once subscribed, you can press also on the bell so you can be notified so that you won't miss any proclamations and discussions on the Sunday Mass readings. Okay, so we'll start with the proclamations as usual. A reading from the book of the prophet Jeremiah. Thus says the Lord, shout with joy for Jacob, exult at the head of the nations. Proclaim your praise and say, the Lord has delivered his people, the remnant of Israel. Behold, I will bring them back from the land of the north. I will gather them from the ends of the world, with the blind and the lame in their midst. The mothers and those with child, they shall return as an immense throng. They departed in tears, but I will console them and guide them. I will lead them to brooks of water on a level road, so that none shall stumble. For I am a father to Israel. Ephraim is my firstborn. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. The Lord has done great things for us. We are filled with joy. When the Lord brought back the captives of Zion, we were like men dreaming. Then our mouth was filled with laughter, and our tongue with rejoicing. The Lord has done great things for us. We are filled with joy. Then they said among the nations, the Lord has done great things for them. The Lord has done great things for us. We are glad indeed. The Lord has done great things for us. We are filled with joy. Restore our fortunes, O Lord, like the torrents in the southern desert. Those that sow in tears shall reap rejoicing. The Lord has done great things for us. We are filled with joy. Although they go forth weeping, carrying the seed to be sown, they shall come back rejoicing, carrying their sheaves. The Lord has done great things for us. We are filled with joy. A reading from the letter to the Hebrews. Brothers and sisters, every high priest is taken from among men and made their representative before God, to offer gifts and sacrifices for sins. He is able to deal patiently with the ignorant and erring, for he himself is beset by weakness, and so for this reason must make sin offerings for himself, as well as for the people. No one takes this honor upon himself, but only when called by God, just as Aaron was. In the same way, it was not Christ who glorified himself in becoming high priest, but rather the one who said to him, "You are my son, this day I have begotten you." Just as he says in another place, "You are a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek." The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Alleluia, alleluia. Our Savior Jesus Christ destroyed death and brought life to light through the gospel. Alleluia, alleluia. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to St. Mark. As Jesus was leaving Jericho with his disciples and a sizable crowd, Bartimaeus, a blind man, the son of Timaeus, sat by the roadside begging. On hearing that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to cry out and say, "Jesus, Son of David, have pity on me." And many rebuked him, telling him to be silent. But he kept calling out all the more, "Son of David, have pity on me." Jesus stopped and said, "Call him." So they called the blind man, saying to him, "Take courage, get up, Jesus is calling you." He threw aside his cloak, sprang up, and came to Jesus. Jesus said to him in reply, "What do you want me to do for you?" The blind man replied to him, "Master, I want to see." Jesus told him, "Go your way, your faith has saved you." Immediately he received his sight and followed him on the way. The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Okay, so we go to the first reading, which was from Jeremiah 31, verses 7 to 9. And this is the summary, from verses 1 to 30. This oracle of salvation continues the theme of rebuilding Israel and re-establishing the people. The oracle uses references to Israel, Ephraim, and Samaria, names for the northern kingdom, in an inclusive way to emphasize the total restoration of Israel and Judah. I remember the 12 tribes were split up. The northern tribes were most of the tribes, and the two tribes that were the southern tribes, just two, were mainly Judah and Benjamin, the smaller one. We shall see that later. So the promised restoration is grounded fully in the love of Yahweh for his people. So the poetic imagery is reminiscent of the Exodus story, the Israelites' wilderness wandering, and their establishment as a nation in the land of Canaan. So verse 1 says, "All the clans of Israel," again emphasizing the complete restoration of all 12 tribes. Israel in the north, Judah in the south. The northern kingdom was defeated and its 10 tribes taken into exile in 722 BC, nearly a century before Jeremiah was born. So this was, as you can see here, I've already highlighted the red. That's the 10 northern tribes, and they call those 10 Israel, and they were split from Judah, which is there on the south, and with Judah are the people from the tribe of Benjamin, As you can see here, at the time of Jeremiah, this was circa 597 BC. So the book of Jeremiah is set during the politically tumultuous times following the fall of the Assyrians and the rise of the Babylonians. During Jeremiah's life, several groups of Judeans were deported to Babylon and the temple was destroyed. Though the precise boundaries of Judea and the surrounding regions during the period are difficult to determine, they likely resembled those that previously existed under Assyrian rule, with the exception that Edom, which was now the area formerly belonging to southern Judah. In verse 7, it mentions Jacob, which is a poetic reference to all of Israel. Remember, one of Jacob's names afterwards became Israel. So Jacob's 12 sons founded the 12 tribes of Israel. We shall see their names later. And it also mentions the remnant of Israel. In salvation oracles, the remnant often refers to the scattered survivors of judgment who will be gathered back to Israel through Yahweh's act of redemption. No? And these are the 12 tribes of Israel. No? And we know Abraham married Sarah, had Isaac. Isaac married Rebekah, and had Jacob. No? And Jacob had a number of children from different women. No? So Leah had, the eldest was Reuben, and later we shall hear again the name of Reuben. Number 2 was Simeon, 3 Levi, and number 4 was Judah. No? And Jacob also had children from Bela, which was Rachel's servant, and that was Dan and Naphtali, 5th and 6th children. No? And then the 7th and 8th were Gad and Asher, from Leah's servant, and her name was Zilpah. Okay. The 9th and 10th were again from Leah, Issachar, and Zebulun. Okay. And from Rachel, the younger sister, came Joseph, the 11th child, and the 12th was Benjamin. So these are the 12 tribes of Israel, and they take the names of the 12 sons. So in verse 8, it mentions the land of the north. So the exiles were taken north as the invaders returned the way they came. And usually that's what happens. No? It's usually the invaders, whether Assyria, Babylon, always come from the north, and they go southward to Israel and then Judah. The motive of invasion from the north is reversed to depict the exiles returning from the north. And of course, the blind and the lame are physical infirmities, but the point was these will not hinder the return. In verse 9, there will be weeping, symbolizing genuine repentance. There was a phrase, "I will let them walk by streams of water." So the imagery is reminiscent of an earlier passage in Isaiah. And the salvation oracles often use images of a renewed creation. And then there's another phrase, "I have become to Israel a father." So the metaphor of Yahweh as a father is common in the Old Testament. So we mentioned earlier Ephraim, who was the firstborn, and the phrase is, "He is my firstborn." The reference of the firstborn raises Israel's importance from that of son to most favored son, since he's the eldest. In biblical law, the firstborn receives a double portion of the inheritance. No? In verse 10 mentions the coastlands that often is usually used to refer to the farthest reaches of the known world. Okay, so now we go to Psalms 126, verse 1 to 6. So this is the summary of Psalm 126. This is a corporate lament psalm, no? And we mentioned before, previous Paul episodes, there were thanksgiving psalms, praise psalms. This one is a lament psalm, meaning this is a sad, poetic psalm, no? Although later we shall see that it becomes hopeful, even though it starts as a very sad psalm, because it was made during the time when Israel was under foreign rule, no? So this lament pleads for Yahweh to restore Israel as He has in the past, no? So really, for them, no, they have history. They know that Yahweh saved them before, and now they're asking Yahweh to save them again. It's also one of the pilgrimage psalms, and this is very interesting to me because it says that it was this psalm, or these psalms, are intended to be sung during pilgrimage to Jerusalem whenever they would take a pilgrimage going to Jerusalem. So that was interesting to me. So the psalmist begins by recalling a time when Yahweh restored the nation, no? Describing the Israelites' joy and the surrounding nation's awareness of Yahweh's power as a result of the event. The psalmist then presents the request of corporate Israel for Yahweh to restore Israel again, anticipating new joy following Yahweh's help. No? So they really you know, look to Yahweh for assistance, no, and for saving. No? So a song of ascents, no, but we focus on verses 1 to 3. The first half of Psalm 126 describes a previous time when Yahweh had restored Israel, no, and really, they have faith. Their faith continued because of their history, no. So they really go back to their history and how Yahweh saved them before, no. After an initial period of quiet, Israel is joyful, and even the surrounding nations notice Yahweh's help, no. In verse 1, it says, restored the fortunes of. So the Hebrew word used was Shiva, implying captivity when it occurs by itself, but often occurs in the expression Shuv Shiva, as it does here, which literally means restore the captivity of. The expression essentially indicates that Yahweh is returning something to the way it was before the calamity happened. Probably indicates that Yahweh had returned the Israelites to Jerusalem after a period of exile, likely a reference to the events following 538 BC. There's also a phrase like dreamers, indicating that the Israelites were in a daze as though awakened by surprise. So, going to verse 2, they said among the nations, and this reflects the Old Testament theme that nations will watch what happens to Israel and see it as a reflection of God's power and care for them. Yahweh has done great things for these people, and corporate Israel repeats this line almost verbatim in Psalm 126 verse 3. The nations acknowledge Yahweh's greatness because of his actions on behalf of Israel. No? So apparently the surrounding nations see and have been witness to the successes of Israel, no, and they also attribute that to Yahweh, no, or the Israelite God, no. And the psalmist portrays them as introducing this insight to Israel. The sequence is perhaps intended to demonstrate humility on the part of Israel. In verses 4 to 6, in the second half of Psalm 126, the Israelites beg Yahweh for help in their present situation. Again, they're under new rule. No? The psalmist depicts the restoration in terms of ample water in the desert and bountiful harvest that prompts new joy. No? So verse 4, restore, O Yahweh, our fortunes. So here we see the psalmist and Israel express a plea, a current request. Israel now finds itself in a situation of great crisis, no, again, and needs God to rescue and restore them. In verse 5, those who sow with tears. No? So the motif of sorrowful planting and joyful harvest occurs twice in verses 5 to 6. The verses focus on the sorrow of the planter, which may reflect Israel's captivity, no? And shall reap with rejoicing. No? While verse 5 emphasizes the joy of the harvest, verse 6 adds the element of a very bountiful harvest. The joyful harvest probably reflects the exiles' return to Jerusalem being accompanied by security in Jerusalem and Yahweh's presence. No, so again, you see so they are they are oppressed. They were oppressed at that time, and but again, they were hopeful. They were willing to suffer before the rejoicing. Okay, so now we go to the second reading, which is Hebrews 5 verses 1 to 6. So a summary up to verse 10. In this passage, the author explains Jesus' role as high priest. Just like Aaron and his sons, Jesus was appointed by God. However, he was appointed in the order of Melchizedek. Okay, so who is this Melchizedek? We'll see in a bit. No? This discussion prepares for the later exposition of the priesthood of Jesus. No? So in verse 1, the phrase appointed on behalf. So God appointed priests in the past to mediate between himself and the Israelites. No? While the Old Testament emphasized that the priestly line was to be Levite and male, this passage emphasizes the common humanity between the priest and those he represents. Now, gifts and sacrifices likely refers to sin or purification offerings and burnt offerings, no? Okay, and we already mentioned that even in the last Paul, um, their offerings are really done to purify, to cleanse from sins. No? How about ignorant and led astray? Refers to unintentional sins as opposed to intentional sins. And then verse 3 was, it says, obligated to offer sacrifices. The law had always required that priests offer an unblemished bull for their own sins. No, so in the past, the Old Testament, um, the priests also offer sacrifices for their own sins. No, because in the olden times the priests were, of course, were sinful, which is in contrast to the new priest, which was Jesus, who is without sin. So after this offering, they could offer sacrifices for the people of God. So apparently they sacrifice first, so that they will be honorable enough, clean enough to offer sacrifice for the people of God, or the Israelites at the time. Verse 4 says, does not take for himself. So as the deuterocanonical work of First Maccabees records, kings negotiated and granted the offices of the priesthood, meaning that the office of a priest was hijacked by those vying for power. No? So that's politics, even in the olden times. And then called by God, God appointed Aaron and his sons to serve as priests within Israel. In verse 5, Christ did not glorify himself. No? So like priests in the line of Aaron, Christ did not appoint himself. Christ was crowned with glory on account of his death. No? And then, today I have begotten you. So it's a quote, no, from Psalm 2, verse 7, emphasizing that God, who called Jesus his son, appointed Christ as high priest. The same verse is quoted in Hebrews 1. And in verse 6, it says priest forever. This citation from Psalm 110, verse 4, is cited to demonstrate that God appointed Jesus, very important, as an eternal priest. No? So again, sinless and eternal priest. So Jesus is also a high priest, but more than the previous priests in the past, sinless and eternal. Now we go to Melchizedek. Who is this Melchizedek? A mysterious figure who appears in the Bible only in Genesis 14, verse 18, and Psalms 110, verse 4, and several places in Hebrews, like Hebrews 7. So in the Old Testament, Melchizedek is described as the king of Salem, no? And was a priest, no? So he was both a king and a priest. And Salem apparently means peace, no? So he was a king of peace, no? Okay. In Psalm 110, verse 4, Melchizedek is evoked as an ideal priest king. The psalm suggests that another Melchizedek will come from David's lineage, no? And so that sets the stage in the future for another king of peace, who is also a priest, a high priest, and from David's lineage, and and of course that's Jesus, no? As a place, Salem is often identified with Jerusalem, so Jerusalem, because of the similarity of names and because the meeting between Abraham and Melchizedek occurred within the King's Valley, which is associated with Jerusalem. No? So the story was, Abraham came from war, no, and I think was meeting with rival kings, and then this priest king from Salem, no, gave them bread and wine, I think, no, and then Abraham gave Melchizedek 10% of his bounty. No? So the Jewish extra-biblical book of 2nd Enoch depicts God as instructing the angel Michael to save Melchizedek from the flood. So this is not in the Bible. It's in other sources. No? The Melchizedek scroll, a text from the Dead Sea Scrolls, depicts Melchizedek as a heavenly figure who is more exalted than the angels. So again, higher than the angels. No? Other Dead Sea Scrolls texts, along with the ancient writers Josephus and Philo, mention Melchizedek with little or no elaboration. So it's really a mysterious figure. So verse 7 mentions flesh. The Greek word used was sarx, reinforcing Jesus' humanity. His incarnation is essential to his experience of human life, which culminated in his suffering and death. Again, from last one, it's connected to the readings for this particular Sundays, was that Jesus was fully human. No? He was God, but he became fully human. No? Which means he really experienced the hardships as well, or everything about human life, including suffering and death later on. And then prayers and supplications likely refers to Jesus' prayers in the Garden of Gethsemane. So from Catholic Answers, there were two articles I saw: who was Melchizedek and was Melchizedek Jesus? No, because there were a lot of similarities, right? King of Salem, or King of Peace, no, priest king, okay, and then higher than the angels. No? So he makes only a brief appearance when he offers a sacrifice of bread and wine and accepts a tithe offering from Abraham, later named Abraham, because he simply appears mysteriously and the Bible gives no account of his origin or demise. The book of Genesis makes it appear that he was an eternal priest without beginning or end. Sounds, similar to Jesus, right? And his name is also not really a name, but rather a title, King of Righteousness. No? So the reason that Jesus is not identified as Melchizedek is that Psalm 110 states that the Messiah is a priest in the order or manner of Melchizedek. It does not state that the Messiah is Melchizedek. So Hebrews 7 verse 3 states that Melchizedek resembles the Son of God, not that he is the Son of God. Jesus is indeed like Melchizedek in that he is without beginning, without end, and offers also a sacrifice of bread and wine, as we see, as we commemorate in Mass as well. No? So the Church has never taught definitively who exactly Melchizedek was. So therefore the Church leaves open that he was a normal human being, or perhaps an angel, sometimes identified as Saint Michael, no, since he's a little bit higher than the other angels. All right, so now we go to the Gospel of Saint Mark, no, and in the Gospel, it mentions Jericho, and this is a city located 5 miles west of a major crossing of the Jordan River. Jericho was the only large settlement that a traveler could pass through when going up from the Jordan Valley to Jerusalem. Remember, Jerusalem is on top of a hill, no? And Jericho held a significant role in Israel's history, no, in the Old Testament, no? So this is from Bible Hub, and as you can see, if you look at the gray part in the middle, that is a valley, and at the center is the Jordan River running from north to south, draining into the Dead Sea, you know. And if you go up the valley, first you will see, if you go up, Jericho is there on the west bank of the valley of that that river, no. And then, as you remember, if you remember from the travels of Jesus, as documented by Saint Mark, no, he came from Tyre in the northwest, went up to Sidon, went southeast to Decapolis, to Capernaum in the Galilee area, and then now went to Jericho, and then later will go to Jerusalem. No? So on the way to Jericho, but first let's go to the history pala of Jericho. No, so Jericho falls to Joshua and the Israelites after the city walls fall down. No, remember when the Israelites were trying to find their way in the desert, after they were led out by Moses from Egypt. They were going around the desert, and the first city that fell to them, was Jericho. So, and the walls actually fell down, leaving Jericho vulnerable, and that's why they were able to win the day. So Joshua precisely followed Yahweh's instructions for approaching the city, despite the unconventional nature. So what did Yahweh command? He told Joshua to march Israel's army around the city once a day for 6 days. And on the seventh day, they were to circle the city 7 times, and then the walls would fall down. Apparently, that was what happened. So this was ancient Jericho. Jericho was the first city Israel conquered in Canaan, the promised land, after the Israelites marched around the city for 7 days. Its walls fell as the priests blew ram's horns, and the Israelites shouted at Joshua's command. So look at the city, no? It has a lower wall and then an upper wall, no? So archaeological excavations reveal that Jericho was violently destroyed sometime toward the end of the Bronze Age, no? The walls seem to have been thrown down by sudden force, as if by an earthquake. So charred wood showed that what was left of the city was burned. Excavators have also found food supplies buried in the destroyed city, which shows it was not captured by siege. No? And so, what saying is seems to be consistent with the Old Testament narrative. And if you look at Jericho, Jerusalem is is to the west, but going up the hill now. Okay, so that's Jerusalem. So on his way to Jerusalem from Jericho, Jesus heals a blind beggar. This is the final healing miracle recorded in Mark. So the blind man receives his sight by believing that Jesus is the Messiah, unlike the blind generation who will reject Jesus shortly when he arrives in Jerusalem. Now in verse 47, it mentions the title Son of David, which Bartimaeus called out to Jesus, Son of David. So the first time Jesus is called by this title was in Mark. In the Old Testament, it was prophesied that the Messiah would be a descendant of David. Although Bartimaeus' use of this title has clear political implications, Jesus does nothing to silence him, suggesting that Jesus was now ready for his identity to be widely known. Remember a couple of Sundays back, when Jesus asked the apostles, "Who do you say that I am?" Peter answers, "You are the Christ, the anointed one, the chosen one." And then Jesus said, "No, do not tell anyone about this." Okay, so but this time around, it appears that Jesus was now ready for his identity to be widely known. And Jesus said, "Your faith has healed you." So the man's recognition that Jesus is the Messiah prompts Jesus to heal the man. So just wanted to end by going through the miracles of Jesus. I counted, and in this table shows 35 miracles all in all. So let's just go through them. And it's documented by either Matthew, Mark, or Luke, and at the end from the book of John. So Jesus heals many people. That's one. Jesus cleanses a leper. Jesus heals a centurion's servant. Jesus heals Peter's mother-in-law and others. Jesus calms a storm. Jesus heals the demon-possessed. Jesus heals a paralytic. Jesus heals a woman with hemorrhage. Jesus raises Jairus' daughter. Jesus heals 2 blind men. Jesus heals a demon-possessed man again. So additional miracles. Jesus heals a man with a withered hand. Jesus feeds 5,000 people. Jesus walks on water. Jesus heals the Syrophoenician's daughter. Jesus heals many other people. Jesus heals another 4,000 people. Jesus heals an epileptic boy. Jesus heals 2 blind men at Jericho. So that was in Jericho, no? And Jesus heals a man with an unclean spirit. Jesus heals a deaf and speechless man. Jesus heals a blind man at Bethsaida. And then Jesus heals Bartimaeus, the blind man, in this particular reading that we looked at today. And Jesus causes a miraculous catch of fish. Jesus raises a widow's son. Jesus heals a disabled woman. Jesus heals a man with dropsy. So I looked at dropsy. What is dropsy? It's edema. So manas, no, in Tagalog. So edema. Then Jesus heals 10 lepers. Jesus heals Malchus's ear. And then these last ones are all documented in the book of John. Jesus turns water into wine. Jesus heals the official's son. Jesus heals a paralytic at Bethzatha. Jesus heals another blind man. Jesus raises Lazarus. Jesus causes a miraculous catch of fish. So I think I counted 35 miracles all in all. So that's it for today's Paul. Proclaim, analyze, understand, and learn. We went through Jeremiah, Psalms, Hebrews, Mark. We distinguished Israel and Judah. We talked about the Lament and Pilgrimage Psalm, which they sing when they trod on to Jerusalem. And Jesus and Melchizedek, no? Jesus appointed in the order of Melchizedek, no? Jericho and Jerusalem we saw in the where they are in the geography of the Holy Land, and Jesus' miracles, no? So that's it for today's Paul, and I pray that Jesus continue to make miracles in all our lives all the time. God bless you.